It is good again to be able to gather together. As Gary said, it was good to see a nice crowd this morning. It's good to still see the crowd this evening. Numbers fluctuate, but it is still good to be seen and to see. This evening, don't forget the simple items. Just a thought I've got about some of these. A couple of the songs this evening have kind of fit in well with that in this very last one here, take the name of Jesus with you. Just take a name. It sounds like such a simple thing, such an easy thing. Doesn't sound like a big thing, but yet we'll see as we go through this lesson, that's sometimes all we need. And in forgetting these simple items, we need to stop and think about it. Sometimes we try and make a mountain out of a molehill because we're trying to focus so hard on getting everything right or get all the details. And as we're going to look at this evening, sometimes it's just as simple as trusting in God. One of the opening verses, I've got several of them listed under the title here, and all of them have the same theme. Judges 7 and verse 7 encapsulates it pretty well. Then the Lord said to Gideon, by the 300 men who lapped, I will save you, and deliver the Midianites to your hand. Let all the other people go, every man to his place. The key part here is this is God speaking to Gideon, and he says, I will save you. This was actually after the pare down here with Gideon, is he had to pare down how many people he had. So he first said, anyone who doesn't want to fight or who is afraid, go home. No worries, just go home. And so a bunch left. And it's like, nope, we still got too many. So they went through a process of weeding them down, and it got down to 300 men, which means they were outnumbered to go against this other army. And so God said, I will save you. So a thought to keep in mind as we go forward. So when we dream of getting something, do we dream big or small? Okay, Christmas just came and gone. For those that dream of gifts to come during the holiday season, how many times do we dream of, I'd like a new pen, or I'd like an eraser? How many would think more along the lines of something bigger and grandeur, of something, a new TV, a new game system, a new, here's the classic, I want a pony. Oof, that's a big commitment. Even just saying a dog or something, a pet, that's a big commitment. So we look at, do we dream small or do we dream big? And sometimes we go big. What happens if we go to bat for God? If we want to stand up and do something great for God, what do we look at? Do we look at the small things? Let's do something small. Let's just kind of do a little bit here and there. Or do we think of something about we need to have the biggest stick? We need to have a big banner. We need to go big. When we stop and think about missionaries, we think about, probably one of the first things we think about are ones that go overseas. Take on the big missionary job. But what about the next door neighbor? So we've got all of the ones around the corner. We've got all of these things, but we always dream big. Today I want to encourage us to remember the simple things. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, we see a youth, a young man. I didn't get the research down to figure out how old he was at this particular time, but in the reading here we see that he is the youngest of the sons, so he was kept back at home to do a lot of the tasks and the chores while the oldest were out at this battle. And we see that this young man, armed with a slingshot and his faith, was able to take down a giant. When we look at this and we start looking through this story and look through everything, we see that this man called Goliath, a champion of the Philistines, a man who has been a warrior since his youth, is standing before the army of God, the nation of Israel, defying them, laughing at them, toying with them, and saying, why don't y'all send me your best person out here, one-on-one, and we'll settle this right here and now. And in order to look at him, you got to look higher than the ceiling. He is big. His armor weighs more than what most people contribute to the temple, given the size of all of this. So we look at this and we see that he has been defiling the words of God. He does all this, and we even see that he did this every single morning for 40 days straight. And then possibly a little bit more, because then we see where David is sent to go and check on his brothers and bring some provisions, not only to his brothers, but also to the chief of his battalion. So to, sweeten the pot a little bit. Maybe they won't get the most dangerous of duties and such. You always want to take care of your officers, and that way, makes it a little easier. And so the time that it takes David to get there, the army was greatly afraid. We see that in a couple of verses, that they are greatly afraid. And there are doubts. David gave inquiry about what's going on. He gets there, looks around. His boy's like, I need to bring news back to my father. I need to see what's going on. How's the army of our country doing? We're in this great battle against them. How are we? What news can I bring back home? And he sees fear in everyone's faces. He sees everyone down and out, and he looks, and eventually it works his way. All his inquiries make it to the king. Even the king has doubts with him. In verse 31, now when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, the king, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him, Goliath. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistines. How about that? We have Saul has amassed his army and has been sitting there at least 40 days, if not a little bit more. And they're all sitting there ready to go. And little TJ walks up there and says, what's the problem? I'll go get him. Imagine the king's reaction. And this is where in 33 he looks at David and says, you're not able to go against this Philistine, for you're a youth, and he is a man of war since his youth. But David said, he has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord will deliver, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul recognized something simple in David. It wasn't about all the gizmos and gadgets. It wasn't about all the armor that he just put on him. He said, okay, fine, go get him. Go get him, kid. And puts all his armor on him, and the boy's like, I can't move. And takes it all off and goes out with a slingshot. Simply put, in verse 45, David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. People always joke about being struck down by lightning by God when they use his name in vain or do something really stupid or bad. And so, but yet here David is saying, you have insulted our God, the God. I come to you in his name. You come to me with all your weapons of war and everything else. I come to you in the name of God. And in verse 50 we see, so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. A slingshot took down a giant who was a master of war. Didn't matter all of the war and everything else that he had. David went with the simplicity of heart of faith in God. If we want to remember the simple things, it's often said it's best to keep one's mouth shut sometimes. And in this case, this next example is true. When we stop and think about Joshua chapter 6, we see where the nation goes and conquers Jericho. Now, when they go to conquer Jericho, it is a well-fortified city. It is a place that they were probably not going to be able to just break into on their own, but they were told to walk around the city each day in silence. Just march around once and go back to camp. On the seventh day, you march around it 7 times. The first 6 times, you walk around in silence. The 7th time, when the priests blow the trumpets, you shout. Simple instructions. If I'm standing there, I'm probably scratching my head saying, how's that going to work? These are massive walls, and we're just going to walk around it and get some marching exercise. Okay. On the 7th day, on the 7th time, we shout when we hear the trumpets blow. Okay. I guess we're getting pumped up and ready for the next big thing. That was the big thing. The simplest thing was the big thing because it was the faith in God. Verse 20 of chapter 6 says, so the people shouted when the priest blew the trumpets. And it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet and the people shouted with a great shout that the wall fell flat. It's not about what we do. It's about the power of God, and the part that's on us is that do we do what God said to do in faith? This was a very simple thing. It wasn't about taking all the weapons of war and trying to figure out how to knock down a wall that was probably looked upon as unbreakable. It was about following the commands of God with faith. Could they do it? Apparently they did. Because right there it says they did as directed, and the wall fell flat. We could look many times at the idea of a simple rod and staff. Many throughout the history of the Bible had the rods and staff, as the shepherds were very prevalent. And so we see the power of a stick. Okay, it was a very well constructed stick. It was one that would be utilized for the protection of the animals, of shepherding them, of getting them in and out of places, of protecting from things. But we see over and over how these sticks have done great things because they were used from the hands of men who trusted and obeyed God. Moses and Aaron used them to reveal God's power to the Egyptians through the plagues. Each time the sticks were used, the stick was thrown down, it turned into a serpent. Well, their magicians were able to do the same thing, but yet Moses and Aaron ate theirs and returned back to sticks. When all these things kept happening, the sticks were usually used, the rod and staff. The staff was part of the used to part the sea. He was told to raise his staff over, and the sea would part. The staff was used during battles afterwards, and as long as the staff remained raised, then the victory would be theirs. Such simple things. Think about Psalms 23, verse 4. In the hand of the great shepherd of Christ, they are a comfort to those who follow him. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The rod and staff were not used to keep the sheep in line. It was used to keep them safe. Another simple item we can think about is just a water pail. A water bucket was used to identify the one who was to be selected as Isaac's wife. When Abraham sent a servant out to go and find a suitable match for his son, when he came to the city, he prayed to God that the one whom I ask to drink at the well will also provide drink to the animals. May it be like this. And so when he got there, in Genesis 24 is the account of this, and she did so. In verse 18, so she said, "Drink, my lord." And she quickly let her pitcher down to her hand and gave him a drink. And when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking." A simple tool of a water bucket was used in a process of finding the wife for Isaac. We could even go back to the beginning of time. Look at God creating all things. And we see that in the beginning, dirt was used. First, he created the dirt and all that there was, and on the last day, he created man out of dirt. In Genesis 2 and verse 7, the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. He could have done something miraculous like he did with everything else, but he used something that he already created. He used something simple, just dirt, and created us. Jesus utilized dirt in his ministry. I think quite interesting in this one right here, kind of a combination between just dirt and spit. He took those two simple items and did something miraculous. He healed somebody. He healed a man that had been blind since birth. In John chapter 9, the first 12 verses give of this account, but what he looks at, we see in verse 6, when he had said these things, he spat on the ground, made clay with the saliva, anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which is translated sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The reason for using something simple is the verse before. He says, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Dirt was used by Christ to show the glory of God. Simple items that are found every day. What simple items are in our lives? What do we choose to use when we go about our tasks? We each have different gifts. We each have different talents. The parable of the talents is that a master gave certain amounts of money to different people, expected growth when he came back. An application for us today is, what skills do we have? When we look at the body, it is many members make one body. Each piece of the body does a different task. What's our task? What is the things that we are able to do? We don't have to have all sorts of miraculous. We don't have to be like Christ or the apostles who could do these huge things that were written down for all time. It could be something simple. It could be giving someone a ride. It can be just having a conversation with somebody. It can be writing out a card. There's so many ways that we can do it. We can have a one-on-one Bible study, group studies, Bible study teachers. What is our gift? And what do we use? We don't have to be the richest of the congregation. We don't have to be fill in the blank. The simple items. Sometimes the simplest of items is time. An ear to listen. An open Bible to guide life. All these things are available. When we look at each of these instances, not one of them was about the items used, rather their focus on God. With faith while using those items. It's not about the item. It was never about the slingshot with David. It wasn't about the silence with the nation of Israel. It wasn't about the stick, the staff and rod. The water bucket had nothing miraculous to it. There's nothing special about dirt. It's dirt. But yet, with God, with the faith in God, and in His commands, it became something more. Do we have the courage to approach each day with simple items paired with our faith in God and His power? What items will we bring with us each and every day? Sometimes it's just about what we have with us. There are many times that, we may not have all the things that we really want to have with us for a particular time. Man, I wish I had this right now. What do you have? What do I have? Do we have faith in God? Do we have the knowledge of Him? Do we have the peace that passes all understanding? Do we have the ability to share that with others? That's all that's required. It's not required what objects we use to accomplish that. That is up to us to utilize the gifts that we have. God is a generous God, has given us many things. What He asks is that we pass it on. We do good unto all, especially those of the household of faith. How we do that is up to us. These people here that have been highlighted, we can find many more, all use simple items paired with their faith. What will we use? We may not be written for all time to remember us with, but we don't have to be. The only place I need to be written, that I would like to be written, is in the Lamb's Book of Life. That's where I want to be. And I don't care about being written in any history books. I don't care about being written on any accolade list. I just want to be written on His list. Can I use the simple items in my day? Can I trust God enough to let that be what I use? Because I'm using His strength and power. Just like He did with the army being dwindled down to only 300. So that God could provide His glory. So that He is the one who did it. Do we give God the glory? Do we let Him shine through us? That's the goal as we go through the rest of this year and the next year and the rest of our lives. Give God the glory with whatever we use. And it doesn't have to be the big things. It can be every little thing. It can be the big things if it needs to be. Let's remember the simple items. Because with God, everything counts. If there's anyone that needs to be reminded of the simple items, if anyone needs the simple items of just the prayers of the congregation, the support of each other, if we need the big things of the forgiveness of our sins to be accepted as a child of His, if we need any of these things, if we need something that has not been listed, there's a time now offered while we stand and sing to come and for the invitation.